Namaste everyone. This is Bhuwan from Coach Me Nepal. I'm here again with another awesome learn and grow session. As you know, we do this every week. And why do we do this? Because Coach Me is a platform focused on learning, growing, and transforming. Today we're going to talk about clean questions in NLP. We'll discuss some techniques I learned as a coach and from my NLP gurus. So these again are not my original ideas at all. I'm only spreading the knowledge. So let's get started. Clean questions are basically based on David Grove's work. Unfortunately, David died in 2008. However, his work has had an amazing and profound influence not only in the area of clean questions, but also in the creation of NLP. Surprisingly, he never considered himself a NLP coach or a trainer, even though he was definitely an awesome therapist and a coach. As a matter of fact, David was very resistant to the concept of NLP as a whole, and had it not been for the determination of Penny Tompkins and James Lawley, his impact on NLP may not have happened at all. They modeled David's skills and behaviors, and it is due to their valuable work. NLP has some of David's impressive thinking and qualities that are readily available to us. David's best gift to us must surely be these clean questions. These questions are simple but powerful enough to be able to create life changing insights. And if and when used effectively, it can have amazing results. They can be extremely effective when used with an intention of exploration and a lot of curiosity. Clean questions can come in handy for all sorts of professionals, including corporate executives, business leaders, managers, coaches, and therapists. These questions will surely enrich the quality of connections with their colleagues, staff, and clients. So, what makes clean questions? Asking clean questions means to be naive, curious, open, alert, fascinated, eager to explore, and a little bit selfless. Whether you want to model someone else's excellence or simply understand your staff or colleagues better, it is important that you ask these questions with the genuine intention of learning about the person in front of you. Being awesome in asking clean questions also requires you to realize the effect of every word or sounds and nuance of language being used. Effectively asking these questions also requires you to use silence in a powerful way. Silence, if used effectively, can magically discover what lies beneath the surface, and that could hold the keys to the strategies of success or what changes can give you the desired outcome. The clean questions are absolutely amazing at discovering strategies and changing outcomes, and this is remarkable if you consider how simple these questions really are. Example of clean question, it could be and mirror their words in what way? So if someone in front of you says, I feel confident when I'm talking to a group of people, you could respond by saying, and that makes you feel confident in what way? Of course, keep in mind, if you're asking these questions, you need to be sincere, curious, and non judgmental. Now, to make you understand this a little bit better, let's consider this conversation between a manager and a staff. Just give me a sec, I'll have to share the screen with you. So here's the conversation between a manager and her staff. As her staff went to a presentation meeting, she came back and obviously she didn't do so well. So the manager calls her staff in to have a normal conversation about what actually happened. But keep in mind that the manager has some coaching skills and she knows some NLP techniques, right? So she knows about clean questions. So this is how it would go, or it went. Staff, Srishti, her name is Srishti. I just felt the client disliked me. I could see there was a negative connection with him to begin with. Manager. And negative connection in what way? Srishti. Well, I'll try to explain, but not sure how. I felt that we just did not gel. I was afraid this would happen, and it did. Manager. Afraid. How do you mean? Srishti. I knew this was a very important client, and my presentation was vital to sell our products to him. So I was thinking about this meeting quite a lot, and I had kind of imagined how this presentation would go. Manager. When you say you had kind of imagined, in what way? Srishti. Well, I think I was thinking about it since a couple of days. I was visualizing this presentation meeting in my head like a movie. Every time I visualized it, the client appeared to be quite difficult. So I had a hunch it would turn out to be true. Manager. When you visualize the meeting and the client appeared to be quite difficult, what is that like? Srishti. It is a nerve wracking experience. It's like a nightmare and nothing is going my way. And it makes me feel really small. I feel nervous. So we'll look at this portion of the conversation, and there's a little bit more of the conversation. We'll come back to the rest of the conversation later. So let's go back to the top and see actually what happened, right? Let's discuss what actually happened in here. So this was a meeting between a manager and a staff after a presentation meeting that Srishti had. And since the manager had some coaching skills, she wanted to explore what Srishti actually meant or what she actually experienced. And, she wanted to figure out if she could actually help Srishti in some ways. So Srishti tells her manager what happened. Srishti explains it in a very vague and abstract way, like most of us do. A negative connection, she says. Negative connection is pretty vague. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it doesn't actually say what it means. Negative connection could mean anything. So she says, um, I could see there was a negative connection with him to begin with, right? Manager replies with, and, and, rest of her words, right? She replies with and then the rest of her words. The word and tells Srishti that the manager is actually listening to her. When you use the word and to start a sentence, the person in front of you knows that you're listening and they can relax. When you start your sentence with and, after they've just finished their sentence, they feel like you're building on what they've just said. Instead of starting something new, you're adding on to what they've just recently said. And is very important and is a small yet powerful word. This magical word is often used in hypnotherapy as well, as it communicates that as a listener, you're with the client and they can relax. And says, I want to build on what you've just said. It's a very friendly word. Manager repeats Srishti's words, a negative connection. Srishti is being vague by not clarifying what negative connection really means, like a lot of us do with our conversations. Why do we do this? It's because it's almost impossible to include all details in our conversation. We delete a lot of information in our everyday conversation and we expect the other person to make accurate assumptions about what we really mean. This deletion is not intentional by no means, but natural because it is impossible to include everything in our conversation. When we repeat the words exactly as spoken by the person in front of us, it assures the listener that they've been sincerely heard. It makes them feel like we're speaking their language. When the exact words are mirrored back to the listener, it also invites the listener to self reflect a little bit. This will encourage them to internally examine what they actually mean because they themselves may not be consciously aware. Then the manager ends it with, in what way? Right? This is what makes the question really clean. The manager does not ask, what did you do? What does that feel like? Or what does that look like? This question is a neutral one and it enables the listener to answer whatever way they may choose with a lot of self reflection. If the manager had asked, "What did you say?" and if there was no actual conversation between them, that would not help their self reflection and might actually be an interruption. It breaks the state. The listener, when they listen to the question and some questions don't relate to the event at all, that will break their state. They will come out of their present state, and that's not helpful for self reflection. There's a lot going on in the first few sentences itself. You have to pay really close attention to the other person. And had Srishti looked confused, that would be the cue for the manager to reflect on his own questioning style and maybe ask a question in a way that elicited maximum and more open response from Srishti. The manager changes his questioning style a little bit later on. He says, and when you visualize the meeting and the client appeared to be quite difficult, what is that like? This This is a really good example of clean questions. The question starts with, and then the manager repeats the words Srishti used and ends with the question, what is that like? Clean questions are usually asked in the present tense, and this has a special purpose. When you when you ask clean questions in present tense, the other person is then remembering her or his experience as if they're living it right now, as if it was happening all over again. Then Srishti replied to this question using a metaphor. The metaphor she used is nightmare. Now, metaphors are very important. Metaphors can bypass our critical faculty in our brain quite easily. And these metaphors always mean a lot more than our conscious mind can comprehend. So when you ask a follow up question, it's very helpful if you use the same metaphor used by the listener, right? It affects them even more and they can relate to it faster, quicker, and more effectively. Of course, the manager could have asked what kind of nightmare, but she had already answered that question by saying where nothing is going my way. This also shows that Srishti is already introspecting and reflecting. This is where we can slowly start getting clarity on Srishti's experience. We can now at least look at the structure of how she creates negative connections with the clients when she's doing her presentations. This could easily be a strategy she employs intuitively, but not consciously. That ensures a failure. This helps us understand how she actually pulls this off, how she does this. Once we have detailed structures of Srishti's strategy, we can begin to work on what will actually help change her behavior or change her behavior to something that will get the results that she actually wants. Right? It is also important to keep in mind that if Srishti's experience had been a positive one, that could be analyzed and that would help us replicate that success by repeating the same exact strategy over and over again. Now, let's look at the rest of the conversation. Manager, and this nervousness, whereabouts is that? Srishti. I feel really funny in my gut. She points to her gut. Manager points to Srishti's gut. This feeling of nervousness, what is that like? Srishti. Oh, it feels like a roller coaster ride in my stomach. It feels really bad as the feeling seemed to run wild in there. I want to throw up. Manager, when you feel this nervousness and want to throw up, what happens right before that? Srishti. I'm not sure. She thinks about it for a few seconds. I think about my last three presentation meetings that went really bad. Wow, I just realized this. I had no idea I did this. Manager, you think about your last three meetings. In what way do you think about them? Srishti, I think about them means I have a movie running in my head that kind of highlights all the time that I've fumbled and I've screwed up my presentations. I hear some of the client's staff giving me negative remarks even before I complete the presentation. I did not know I was torturing myself this way by visualizing these past events. Manager. Manager sits there silently for a couple of minutes to let Srishti really reflect on this. We've talked about the importance of silence and the power of silence. Sometimes it's just, and sometimes a pause or a small silence will allow the other person to reflect upon and integrate this learning, right? So Srishti looks down, takes a long deep breath, and looks directly at the manager. Manager, I hear that you have a movie running in your head that kind of highlights your past presentations and you feel nervous, point to her uh, gut. It's like a nightmare and nothing is going your way. Then what happens? Swisti, I think this puts me in a very negative state. She looks down, takes another deep breath. And since I am in this state before the meeting, I think I'm going to have a difficult meeting no matter what I'm trying to sell. Manager, you think you're going to have a difficult meeting, and what is something you know you can do immediately to change this? Srishti, I don't even know I was doing this, but I have to stop visualizing my past failures. Manager, stop visualizing your past failures and start doing what? Srishti, I think I should in fact start visualizing my successes. I'll start to run movies of my successes, of my previous interactions with my clients in my head. So here are the major elements of Srishti's strategies that stop her from giving a presentation that yields the desired outcome. You can see these kind of structures in many people around us. It could be our colleagues, our friends, our family members, and these can be resolved by introspection, by being curious, and it helps to have someone assist you with this. Maybe a coach, a manager, a boss. It's better if questions are asked by someone else but you. Again, what do clean questions actually mean? Clean questions are mostly open questions asked in the present tense that inspires the other person to introspect by going deeper and analyzing their perception. However, we should try to avoid asking why questions as much as possible because why questions tend to motivate us to blame someone or a circumstance for the situation they're in. Some examples of clean question we could ask are, let me share the screen again. And what kind of their words is that? So a person in front of you says, I have this strong feeling in me. So you could ask, what kind of strong feeling is that? This allows the other person to explain what they're actually saying. It is absolutely possible that when they're explaining it further, they will become really associated with their experience. And this association is part of the reason why these questions work and why these questions encourages introspection and self-reflection. And the other question could be, and there was a summary of keywords so far and anything else. Suppose the person in front of you says, it gives me a sense of confidence, freedom, independence. And you could say, and it gives you a sense of confidence, freedom, and independence. Anything else? This question is awesome at encouraging the other person to go much deeper than they think they can. They can give you a list of things and think that is all there is to it. But when you ask this question, there's a possibility that they figure out that there is actually a bigger list. There's much more to it than they actually realize. However, when you ask this question and they introspect, it can be a pleasant surprise for everyone involved, and they still had a few more things hidden away from their immediate consciousness. But it's also important to know when to stop and realize that the other person has emptied everything they have got. If you ask this question one too many times, the other person can easily get irritated. And again, it gets them out of their present state or associated state and stops working, right? There's a break in state and there's a big interruption that you absolutely don't want. And the other question is, um, and whereabouts is their words. So the person in front of you says, I feel really anxious about public speaking. And you could ask, and whereabouts is this anxiousness? This can help the other person realize the location of her or his feelings. Once you can actually visualize the location of the feeling, it gives you the confidence of actually being able to do something about it. And the other question is, and that's like what? We discussed this earlier when Srishti used the metaphor of a nightmare, so I don't think we need to go into it again. Let's get to the next question. And the next question is, and is there a relationship between their words and their words? So the example could be, every day I come back home from work, I end up having an argument with my spouse. And your question could be, or your response could be, and is there a relationship between your work and having an argument with your spouse? This is a very clever question as it inspires the other person to examine how various elements of their context could be connected somehow. And the other question could be, okay, and and the next question is, and when their words, what happens to their words? So the person in front of you says something like, on weekends, I'm a bit more relaxed and I usually wake up in a really good mood. You could respond by saying, and when you wake up in a really good mood, what happens to your weekends? Again, this question here also looks at connectedness of various elements in our situations. And when you change one element, it can change your entire experience. Okay. There are also some questions that ask the other person to focus outside of their perception and look at their experience in terms of time. And their words, what happened just before. So the person in front of you just said something in the tune of, and I suddenly snap at my parents, and your response could be, and you suddenly snap at your parents. What happens just before? This question really helps the other person to recognize the trigger that drives them to a certain state. This again helps us understand our strategy for our state better. For example, if your staff feels confident and you've already explored what that is like and the whereabouts of this feeling, when you investigate what happens exactly before that, you may discover what steps can be taken in the future to create or to recreate similar state of confidence. And the next example is, and their words, then what happens or what happens next. So the person in front of you just said, after my presentation, I feel really confident. So your response could be, and you feel really confident, then what happens? Or, and you feel really confident, what happens next? Again, this question again helps to elicit your strategy for success so that you can replicate it again and again. The other example is, and their words, and where does that come from? So the person in front of you just said something like, I was sitting on this bench in front of the lake and I was feeling absolutely joyful. Your response would be, and you're sitting on this bench in front of the lake and you were feeling absolutely joyful. Where does that come from? This question actually helps you explore the source of the emotions. This will help you challenge the belief that feelings or emotions just happen out of nowhere and that you're not in control of them. So finally, you can see that Srishti now has a conscious awareness of her strategy for the outcomes he had. Now she can start working on her situation and improve the results she's been getting so that she can get to the kind of results that she actually wants, right? So she's been visualizing all her negative attributes, and every time she's been visualizing her failures. Now she figured out that visualizing your failures before a meeting is not very productive, so she's going to switch back to what? She's going to switch back to visualizing her successes. Of course, I'm not suggesting that Srishti would have resolved all his issues right there and then, but she knows what to pay attention to now and what she needs to work on in order to get the results that she actually wants and the results that actually, um, benefit her. Finally, I would just say that only if you listen with an open mind, with curiosity, and ask the right questions, you can realize the true talents and potential in other people or people in front of you. Um, Clean questions are powerful, they're magical, and they're simple. It's very easy to use. I hope you appreciated this session. And if you have any questions regarding clean questions, you can always write to us. Write a comment, and we'll get back to you. So this is it, friends. We're at the end of the sessions. If you have suggestions, drop us a line at coachmenepal@gmail.com or info at coachmenepal.com. If you have feedback, don't hesitate to share them. We'll be coming with more free sessions and some sessions that are not that free because some of these sessions are awesome and needs a lot of work from us. Please like, subscribe because we love you. We really do. As you know, our goal is to reach and take these learnings to children in remote areas of Nepal who have no access to these kind of learnings, of course, at no cost. We're targeting to reach 2 million children, so your support will go a long, long way. We also have a lot of programs coming in the next few months. We're planning a NLP practitioner training, NLP master practitioner training, NLP influence for business and business professionals. These are some of the courses we're offering this month. Until then, stay safe, love yourself, love the people around you, be kind to them because kindness is the answer to everything, and stay positive, not that way.